Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We are the Virtru Capstone team for our program, and we're here today to present our work on zero trust agents. Uh, I'm here joined by Nick and John, my friends in this journey with me. So here is kind of our mentor in this project, Virtru. Virtru is a data-centric security team. Their mission is to unlock the power of data by creating by having it always under control on your end. And to do this, they use a technology they developed called trusted data format, which essentially encrypts the data in a shell, and this kind of security package travels with the data wherever you send the data. So here is what we're gonna do, walk you through today. We're gonna start with a brief introduction, then we're gonna go through the process of our tool we built. We're talking about the architecture of it. We'll have a live demo for you. Hopefully everything goes well today. And then we're gonna kind of conclude with future steps and our reflection for this project. So let's start with like the story of how we got here today. We're gonna start with this kind of data security challenge. So in today's digital landscape, there is no big perimeter for the data. As you may know, we live in a very connected system, and data is not secure on servers anymore. It travels everywhere with the devices, with the cloud. Data goes everywhere. And the core problem is maintaining control of this data. And crucially, this problem has become even more important with the rise of AI, as we're not just worried about humans sharing files anymore. We're also worried about AI kind of sharing and access and leaking vast amounts of sensitive data potentially. So to address this, our initial project briefing we were given by Virtru was essentially to explore what's called attribute-based access control within Virtu's ecosystem. And our goal here was to build a system that could generate, validate, and enforce the policies needed to kind of enforce these security. Therefore, we started with our first idea, which was something called auto TDF, as we viewed the initial problem as a usability problem, where it kind of was hard for humans to kind of write secure policies. So we proposed this tool, which was more of a web app or a UI kind of thing, which was kind of allowing humans to write policy using natural language instead of code. So easing up this process. As we were kind of doing our research for this project, we kind of had to do a pivot. And this became due to a major realization we did, where it wasn't the core risk about humans writing policies, but it was about AI agents ignoring them. And therefore, we kind of did this pivot, building the tool we're going to show you later on called Zero Trust, which shifted our our call from policy creation to policy enforcement. I might have said a few kind of terms you might are not familiar about this, so I'm going to kind of define them so you can have a better understanding of our tool as we go forward. There are 4 pillars to our project. The first one is called attribute-based access control, in short, ABAC, where essentially compared to a traditional role-based access control, where you are given access to a file, for example, given your role, such as manager, ABAC is more dynamic and it checks other attributes on top of your kind of positions. That those could be who you are, the file sensitivity, the time, and the location. So as an example of where you might use ABAC, so suppose you have access, you're granted access to a top secret security kind of file. You might not be able to access that file if you're at a coffee shop at 2 a.m. at their open public Wi-Fi. The second pillar is zero trust security. This is a very simple concept to kind of describe it, where there's the simple motto here is never trust, always verify. So essentially you have to make sure that every file you're kind of interacting with, you're assuming it could be potentially dangerous and you're kind of always verifying its security. Next is kind of the technology which is behind this whole project, which is developed by Virtru. The trusted data format, as I briefly said before, is a technology that kind of encrypts and protects a single file and keeps that protection and encryption with the file as you share it. Whereas OpenTDF is kind of the open source framework where we can kind of interact and use this technology, which we used for developing our tool. Finally, the model context protocol is another key thing of our project. Think of it more of as a USB port for AI, which allows large language models to be plugged in external data sources. without further ado, I'm now going to pass it on to John, who's kind of going to explain the process.
Um, these are some of the model context protocol servers that we built. So the first on the left is the OpenTDF MCP that wraps that OpenTDF thing Nico talked about. It provides encryption and decryption of the TDF files so that when an AI agent wants to access some kind of sensitive information, the OpenTDF MCP server will negotiate that permission with the user. After it gets all the juicy information it needs to create intel or synthesis, it calls the memo MCP server to learn how to compose and write, format an official memorandum. Then it calls the server again to render it into a fully formatted official memorandum PDF. So quick question for the room. What was in your head? What was your first impression when you saw zero trust AI agents on the title slide? Like what does it mean? To me, zero trust AI initially sounded like some kind of intangible tech babble that your organization doesn't need until you need it in the future, but that's wrong. The LMI team explained AI agent risk management very well, but I want to give you some big picture numbers. For fiscal year 2026, the Department of Defense has requested $13.4 billion budget for investments in AI and autonomy. And we have already awarded a $200 million contract to Anthropic for AI capabilities that advance national security. They're here. AI agents are here, and we need to secure their context. In the next section, Nick and I will show you a live AI workflow secured by OpenTDF, solving a real-world problem in the U.S. Air Force. Now, Nick and I are both in the military, but as we go through the scenario, I want you to imagine how secure context access will be critical in the finance sector, the healthcare, legal, law enforcement sectors. And this is just personally, I really think we should secure our context before we turn on Skynet.
So moving into our scenario, we wanted to bring our tool to life with an access control scenario that is maybe something that could happen in the U.S. Air Force. So if we go into the next slide, this is how a refueling process used to be done in the U.S. Air Force, where there would be an airman in the back of the plane with a physical pane of glass that they would look through to see where to guide that little stick that then injects fuel into the receiving plane so the receiving plane can fly further. Now, over the last decade, the U.S. Air Force has been acquiring new planes, and these new refueling planes have a video camera system with a console behind the pilot that the operator can look through in order to guide the nozzle into the receiving plane. What we wanted to imagine was what happens if this system breaks, because sometimes adding additional complexity, as the U.S. Air Force has done here with the all these screens and cameras, could prove to be an additional area where something could go wrong. A pane of glass will always be there. Video cameras, something could go wrong. So in our scenario, the boom operator is in the middle of transferring fuel to the receiving cargo jet, and then all of a sudden the screens go black, and the boom operator loses vision of the plane that they are injecting tens of thousands of pounds of fuel into. And so in this scenario, we get accounts of what happened from the aircraft commander, co-pilot, and boom operator on the refueling tanker. We get to see some of those flight logs, but then also from the cargo jet, we get to see the aircraft commander, what they thought happened. We get to see the maintainer who works on the refueling jet. We get to see his perspective of what happened when the plane gets back down on the ground, and he's able to inspect the refueling nozzle to see if there's any damage from the emergency eject that had to occur due to the loss of the screens. And then we get to take on the role of the wing commander, and we get to see how she is able to view everybody's accounts of the scenario and write up a memorandum for her to send to her boss, informing the boss of the situation and why these two planes are no longer cleared to fly until maintenance is performed. So without going into the nitty-gritty details here, we wanted to show what entitlements users have. And the key thing here is that different users, based on attributes they possess and roles that they possess, have different entitlements. They can access different documents. The kernel, who she is on the far left of the screen, she has access to all of the documents given her role and the attributes that she has. So moving on to our live demo, first we wanted to show you a video time lapse of what our tool, without using our tool, what the process would have looked like. And so this was a 20-minute recording of me going through and manually decrypting all of the files that were relevant to the scenario, and then manually going through and writing a memorandum to send to my boss. However, this 20-minute video does not include the 20 minutes of setup that had to precede this video, as well as the additional probably 20 to 45 minutes that would have come at the end of the video to finish writing the memorandum, just for time's sake. And so with our tool, this roughly hour-long process minimum can be cut down to less than a minute. And so we're now going to step into our scenario. We're going to take on the role of Colonel Ashley Neese, the base commander, the wing commander, to see kind of how she can use our tool to very quickly write a memorandum for her boss. So John here, in the bottom left, in the bottom right, we can see that he's taken on the role of Colonel Ashley Neese. And so John, if you would please, could we write asking for the agents to go in, decrypt the files, write a properly portion marked document, and send this document to the Air Mobility Command commander.
Sorry, I hate public typing. Portion mark documents.
Excellent. So now the OpenTDF MCP server, with its permissions, as Colonel Ashley Neese, is going to go in. It is going to decrypt all of the relevant files that she has access to, which is all of them, and then it is going to synthesize all of that information to write a memorandum for the boss. And so we can see here, these are the commands that the MCP server is running in order to verify that this is Ashley and that she has access to these documents. And then now we are writing a summary for the commander, and the AI agent is also just giving us some text output for us to view. Kind of what's really important here is we wanted to build sidewalks for humans, if you will, while big tech is building highways for AI. And what that looks like here is before the memorandum is produced in its final PDF format, it is rendered from a markdown document. The user can go into the markdown document and edit it in order to change things as they see fit, because as with all generative AI models, we want to encourage validation of the output before responsibility is taken with a signature and sent off for somebody else to see. And so now we will wait as the markdown is rendered.
Let the creative juices flow.
Before we can see. Excellent. So now that we have the markdown, the quill generation, the memo generation MCP server is going to go in and take this markdown document and turn it into a beautifully formatted PDF. Now this PDF, the rules for how to write these documents in the US Air Force is 27 pages long, which is 27 pages too many for any human to read. So we've gone through and created this service that can allow you to write these properly formatted documents. And so now, for our next demonstration, what we want to do is we want to take on the role of the maintainer, who is, if you will, the lowest level of authority within this scenario. So the maintainer, he does not have a top secret clearance. So he can only access certain files if they have secret clearances applied to them. And because he is not a maintainer for the cargo jet, he cannot access the cargo jet's account of the scenario. He can only access the refueling tanker scenario because that is the plane that he is working on. So if we could ask the agent to decrypt the relevant files to the scenario and write a memorandum for my flight commander detailing what I know of the scenario. So when I say flight commander here, that is the next person in the maintainer's chain of command. And so this
with info based on. So I keep going there.
And so now this memorandum for his flight commander could be stored for an archive of what happened to the incident. And this could also be read by his leadership, who are above the flight commander and the leadership above them, and so on and so forth, to kind of see, okay, what was this individual's perspective without taking all other pieces into account. And so now we have done the decryption of the files that the maintainer has access to. Where the maintainer does not have access to files, those have been denied decryption, so those remain encrypted, and the maintainer cannot access those files. And that is kind of where that secure context access piece is really coming into play here. And now with the decryption complete, we are going to do that same step of render the markdown file, followed by the PDF of the memorandum that can be adjusted accordingly and then signed and sent off in a heartbeat. So with the markdown complete, we're now doing the render. And so now we're waiting for the PDF to render, and naturally things go much slower in a live demo. But here we have a perfectly formatted, almost perfectly formatted.
Just the demo.
The signature block is a little wonky, but memorandum for archive of kind of what the maintainer saw in this scenario. And if we come back to the slides. We want to just kind of wrap things up with a quick discussion of who our intended target here is, who do we want to use this product. And so we think most importantly, security architects, those who want to adopt AI, but fear data leakage and fear agents having access to files that they are not supposed to have access to. We want to build this product for them. And also most importantly, what we wanted to help solve was this idea of overprivileged AI, which is where AI has more permissions than it should be allowed. This goes back to that zero trust principle of deny first, verify access, and then trust afterwards. And kind of the path forward here, Virtru, our client, they have a innovation week coming up. And so we want to kind of propose some ideas of jumping off points from this project for where they can go from there. And so one of the main things that we wanted to recommend was to strengthen the authentication. Currently, this is just a mock authentication scheme. And so if we can replace, if we can upgrade the authentication beyond tokens, and if we can move into robust identity management, whether that be through two-factor authentication or otherwise, that we think would be a good step forward here. We want to encourage the open source community to develop on top of this MCP, both of the MCP servers that we've built here. And some kind of resources that we went through while we were working on this project that we would consider to recommend to our audience here. And for our GitHub repositories, this is where our code lives. And so if you'd like the links to these, please come up afterwards. We'd be happy to share. And now we'd like to open the floor for some Q&A.
Questions from the audience?
Yeah, so given your project's complexity, like all of the authoritative level and all of the rules that you guys have to follow for the documents, what roadblocks have you guys encountered that you think is worth mentioning?
Good question. So we didn't include this in the presentation just because time, but I'd love to crash out on the roadblocks. So the open source OpenTDO platform was not fully tested and documented for cloud deployment. So originally we wanted to do like a ChatGPT app of our demo, but unfortunately it was just difficult getting our servers up on cloud infrastructure. And then we experienced some difficulties with the SDK. The command line tool wasn't super ergonomic. There was a lot of technical gaps that we ran into that kind of also influenced our pivot. But ultimately, like we decided to work with what we had and convey a vision of what is needed in securing AI agents.
Other questions?
Impressive work. I really like the automation you're applying here to a real world task. A question, right? I'm assuming that these sorts of memos have to be digitally signed with a CAC card or some other authentication device. Thoughts about how you'd integrate that into the workflow?
We don't want to cut human authority or agency out of the loop. I think that should be a priority in every AI workflow. And with that said, I think that digital signature workflows could be extremely streamlined compared to what they are now, opening it in like Acrobat and waiting like 5 seconds for it to sign. I think it'll be a combination of UX design, maybe triggered by the AI workflow. And then, yeah, it'll be like having someone in your office telling you, hey, I need a signature.
Thank you.
All right, we have a virtual question from Wayne representing Virtru. Go ahead, Wayne.
Hi, thanks. That was a great presentation, guys. Two things. One, it'd be great if you had, I know you shared some of these growing pains. Really appreciate if you have any documents, if you could share about some of those things. I know we've been working on documentation, working on a lot of it, but it'd be really appreciate anything you have documented, or you could write up a short like, hey, here's where we had some difficulties and where we didn't. The second one was, I was curious, so what do you see are the biggest blockers to adoption, like of your tool by Air Force or any even like commercial airlines, right? Because I think commercial airlines may not have exactly the same security restrictions and concerns, but they probably do have restrictions in terms of legal liability of not wanting everyone to see everyone else's reports related to like mechanical error or in-flight issue.
This may be an error on our end, but what we noticed was when, say, we would start the service on one laptop and encrypt files. When we went to go decrypt them on another laptop, we were having issues with the keys. So as long as files were encrypted and decrypted using the same service on one code space, then we were able to do those files properly. So that's one thing that we would recommend looking into. Yeah, furthermore, I would say really just UX design. We need to have some sort of layer on top that looks pretty for the end user and doesn't require having to start up the OpenTDF in VS Code themselves. That's what I would recommend.
And then on a more like macro level, kind of going back to our answer for Ms. Bukovic, human authority and agency should be paramount in every AI workflow. Even when AI work gets to the point where it can like be super reliable, I hate the idea of cutting humans out of the loop. So as long as we have great UX, as Nick mentioned, I think and even more secure context can seek a lot of adoption and benefit from AI.
If I may add, just improving our UX would also allow kind of the usability of our tool, because at the moment I feel that if someone's not a minimum technical, even the setup would be, let's say, a bit complicated. But by having this UX, maybe in the future, this definitely kind of lowers the barrier to usability of our tool.
Right.
Thank you.
We have another virtual question, I believe, from Brian.
Yes, hi everyone. I just wanted to have a couple of comments from where I sit. From my perspective, I think the project was a success. So I just wanted to say that we really enjoyed, working with the team, and express Virtru's sincere thanks to Carnegie Mellon, to Mark Gardner, to Nico, John, and Nicholas. Just really appreciate all the hard work, and thank you all.
Thank you, Ryan. The pleasure was all ours.
Questions in the room?
A really awesome project. I was wondering about if you can say more about, so you previously talked about the user entitlements. I was wondering if there's any update needed, if ever there's any update needed, how would you update those? Is that, would you need to manually do that with technician, or is that automatic?
On the configuration side, so that's one of the feedback items we're going to send up to Virtru. It gets a little technical, but at the high level, you just need to add attributes in your Active Directory or your Keycloak service, and then configure your mappings of entitlements into OpenTDF.
Yeah, so with Virtru's current commercial product, the way it works is if I was to send you an email, what you would do is you'd click on a link and it would open up in another tab. And because of that, what I can do is I can control when you can access that document, when you can access that email, and what you can do inside of that email, such as downloading files or copy and pasting. And so say you and I are two separate businesses working on some sort of business venture, and then for whatever reason, the business venture ends. But I'd shared potentially sensitive documents about my company with you. I can then revoke your access to those documents. So that's kind of what's cool about the OpenTDF service.
And I would say to addition, this is all thanks also to ABAC, which is a concept we introduced at the start, which kind of allows a dynamic kind of engagement with these files.
We have time for one more question.
So I will do that last question then. I'm interested in kind of spanning different industries and how maybe future directions of a tool like this might be used in education, or you mentioned medical hospitals as well. Formatting documents, I think a lot of industries have standards for. So are there any that came to mind for you all? Obviously, Air Force, it seems like, was using your own experiences to inform a lot of this process, but what other industries do you imagine would be able to utilize this?
Yeah, so kind of touching on the academic industry that you mentioned, CMU has an official letterhead. However, I don't believe too many people know about that. And so by helping increase adoption with a web tool, which we've built separately to automate the formatting of these letterheads, whether that be an Air Force memo or a CMU letterhead or some other formal document. We want to help increase adoption of these formal documents. So that way when a user receives a document, they can look at it and they know exactly where certain pieces of information should be in the document. So one aspect for increasing adoption of academic letterheads.
And on the let's say the ABAC side, the OpenTDF side, I think there's a lot of relevance in, let's say, healthcare, where you need to abide by HIPAA laws. Like maybe you only want a certain individual to access files related to this one case. Managing that with traditional role-based access control would be a nightmare. So ABAC attributes would allow for like more dynamic access control configuration.
Right. Nice job. Thank you, guys.
All right, we have one more group, but we have about 15 minutes.
And I think we'll have some guests
joining us in person for that. So